Alright, what is going on YouTube? First of all, thank you so much for tuning into another video here on my channel. Now, what we're going to go through today then is I'm going to try and help you find the right type of program for you. Now, the first thing I need to clear up is that this video is not going to specifically tell you that you should be following X program or Y program. It is not going to do that. What I am going to do in this video is kind of push you in the right direction in terms of programming. What you've got to understand is that the whole programming aspect, it's got to be completely individualized if you really want to get success with every single person. You know, the way that you are going to change your body is going to be completely different to someone else. You know, because there are so many different factors at play. Not just your genetic makeup, there's also things like your likes and dislikes, lifestyle factors, you know, your training age and experience. That's just scratching the surface. We are literally going to go into so much detail here, as you can see on these things. By the end of this video, you're going to understand that the whole concept of programming is definitely individualized, and there is no such thing as a perfect program for every single person. That's what we're going to highlight in this video. But what I am going to do is kind of scratch the surface a little bit and kind of push you in the right direction based on your goals and generalized ideas depending on different factors in your life. So that's what we're going to cover in this video. I'm not going to give you a specific program to follow, but I am going to help you be pushed in the right direction to help you figure out what is right for you. But anyway, let's get straight into the content. I will catch you guys in a second. Alright then guys, we are going to kick off straight away with the first point then. And we're going to kind of pick up where I left off in the intro part of this video, okay? Programming really is not that simple. You have to get that in your head first of all. There are literally millions and millions of factors which play a part when it comes to deciding what type of program that you should be following or something that you should be designing yourself. This is why it's never ever good to literally follow a cookie cutter program type kind of thing online, because there are so many things that you have to consider about you, your life, the way that your body works, external factors, things like that. There are so many things that play a part which is going to affect how you are going to respond to a certain program. And this is why individual characteristics are such an important role when it comes to designing a program. But we'll skim over a few things now just so you can kind of understand what it takes, or some of the things that you need to be able to understand before you actually go into the concept of designing your own program or finding a program that's suitable for you. So you've got things like training age and experience. You know, how long have you been training for? You know, what kind of training have you been doing in the past? And one thing you also need to understand is that the amount of time that you've been spending in the gym doesn't necessarily mean that you've been training in the correct way. You know, I've been going to the gym now for 6 years, but I'd say of that, I've only been training properly for maybe two years at max. And that's in that time, in these previous 2 years is where I've seen the most amount of results, is where I've been training efficiently and effectively. And that's going to be different for every single person. I can guarantee you, no matter how long that you've been training for, not all of that is going to be effective training. So you have to take these things into consideration. You also have to look at things like injuries as well. You know, are you carrying any long-term injuries? Is it affecting movement in any way possible? Is it creating, you know, reoccurring pain issues? These things are going to play an importance when it comes to picking the type of exercises that you can do depending on your goal. Because with your restricted movement, you might not be able to perform certain exercises, which means that you're going to have to look at alternatives. You have to consider these things. You've also got things like biomechanics and lever length. You know, all of our bodies are slightly different. Me and you, for example, will have different lever lengths, which means that, you know, my femurs might be slightly longer or shorter than yours. And what you've got to understand is the way our biomechanics work is that it might make us respond differently to certain exercises. You know, if we take a squat, for example, if I do a squat, because of my long legs, I get more activation in my glutes more so than my quads. But for someone who's got shorter femur lengths, let's say, like some of my clients, for example, when they do a squat, they have more tension placed over their quads, which means that their quads get more activation. There is these things you have to consider with programming, okay? You then also have to look at the amount of volume that you're currently adapted to. And again, this is relevant to training age and stuff, but again, we'll kind of have to skim over this one because I could be here all day talking about this one. So other than that as well, obviously you have to look at things like previous training blocks. You know, what did you do in your previous training block? How much of that have you adapted to? And then what progressions can we make on top of that training block to enable you to get further towards your goal this time round? So it's really important to look at your previous training block and see, you know, what went well, what went wrong, what needs to be adjusted and what needs to be changed to force an adaptation in your body. You have to look at these things. And of course, there are several adherence factors as well, but this is going to be the next point which I'm going to move on to. So we are going to go straight and then into point number 2, which is adherence. First of all, what we need to understand is before you even follow a training program, the most important factor is that program needs to be something that you can adhere to long term. There is no point in following a program that is not suitable for you in any way, because you will end up giving up, you will not get the results that you desire out of it, and the enjoyment factor is going to go. But to kind of go through this, right, we're going to go through 3 main points, which kind of comes from a very, very famous book by Eric Helms called The Muscle and Strength Pyramid. Very, very good read for any of you gym freaks and you muscle heads out there. You'll definitely love reading that. But this is where this one comes from, okay? When it comes to a training program, it needs to be 3 things. It needs to be realistic, it needs to be enjoyable, and it needs to be flexible. To kind of go through some of those points, the program needs to be realistic. It needs to be something that you can, you know, definitely follow. It's something that your body is currently able to go through, is able to hand the amount of volume, intensity, and frequency, things like that. It's something that you can realistically, you know, follow, adhere to, and something that you can get positive results out of. You know, if you're following a program, if you're a beginner, for example, and you're following a program from like Steve Cook or whatever, and he's training 6-7 times a week, you've got to understand that he's on a completely different level compared to you. That's not a realistic training target for you because you're not anywhere near that level. So the type of program you follow needs to be realistic. It also needs to be enjoyable. Why the fuck would you go into the gym following a program that you don't enjoy? The greatest thing about the programs that I follow now is that I go into the gym and I'm very, very excited to go in and train, go in and lift heavy weights and stuff. You need to be excited for your training program because that's the only way that you're going to get the most out of it. I'm going to kind of refer back to human psychology a little bit here, but in basic human psychology, right? If you enjoy something, this applies across all things in life, okay? If you enjoy something, you are more than likely going to put more effort into it. You're going to stay more consistent and therefore you're going to yield better results from it. On the flip side, if you hate something, then you're not going to put in as much effort, you're not going to remain consistent, and you're probably not going to get any results out of it. This is what you have to understand, okay? And that applies in the training concept as well. You have to make sure that the training program that you design, or the one that you would appreciate or want to follow, is something that you actually really enjoy. And on the final point of that, it's something that needs to be flexible. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. You know, we have so many things going off in our lives. Training is not always a complete priority. You know, we're not all like physique competitors, you know, professional bodybuilders, you know, that's their job. So they can prioritize training around everything. But for a lot of us, obviously we have work, we have families, we have social lives, we have lifestyles to consider. We have all of these things that play an active role in our daily lives. And what you've got to understand is that some of these things will get in the way a lot of the time. You know, I bet there's been many occasions where you might have had to skip a gym session because of work or because of an urgent family matter. These things are bound to happen in life. So you need to make sure that the training program that you are following is somewhat flexible. You know, if you can realistically move a training session to another day in the week so you can spend time with your family, or because you've got a sudden thing come up at work, that's going to be more realistic for you, because that's going to allow you to still maintain the overall build of the program. It's still going to mean that you're going to get the same amount of volume in every week, and it still means that you're going to hopefully make progressions. If you are starting to follow a program that is not flexible in whatever way, it's too rigid, and it's something that you can't physically fit into your lifestyle, then you're going to run into problems. You're more than likely going to end up skipping sessions. You're going to end up not doing the same amount, or not the required amount of volume for you to be able to force an adaptation. And at the end of the day, it's just not going to get you results. So what you really have to understand is that you have to take those considerations into play. You have to really look at your lifestyle overall and see what is going to be realistic for you, something that needs to be enjoyable, and it needs to be flexible. Please bear that in mind before you even go into having a look at the type of program that you need to be following, or one that you need to design. Right, and just before we move on to the next point, guys, we're going to finish off with this final thing, again, from the Muscle and Strength Pyramid, okay? And it is the continuous cycle of success with training, okay? And what this basically refers to then, so say for example at the top, you've got the enjoyment factor of your training program, you're really, really enjoying your program, it then goes round to harder training. You know, you're putting in more effort, you know, you're starting to perform better in your sessions, you're starting to get stronger, get bigger, whatever like that. That's the harder training element there, and that's as a result of the enjoyment factor of your training. That harder training then leads to success. That is where you're going to get success from your program. That's where you're going to start getting stronger. That's where you're going to start getting leaner, building muscle, things like that. When you get that success, that's going to drive the enjoyment factor even more. And it just continues going in a cycle like that. And when you have that continuous cycle going over your training blocks, that's where you're going to make a ridiculous amount of progress. So this is why it's really, really important to make adherence your number one factor. And that's why I spoke about it first. The reason that is the first point that I've really, really spoke about in terms of training program design, adherence is absolutely everything. So make that a priority before you start looking at the program that you want to look at or going into a different type of program. Guys, we're going to go on to the third point right now then. So the third point then is your overall goal. So of course, obviously, before we start any training program, as daft as it sounds, you need to make sure that your program is very much aimed towards the goal that you're trying to achieve. So you need to make sure what your clear focus is with your goal first of all. You can't just simply go into a training program with no overall goal and just expect results. Because if you haven't got a clue what you're doing, how can you actually manipulate your program towards helping you achieve that goal? You've got to think about that, okay? So whether your goal is powerlifting, whether it's to build strength, whether it's to build muscle, get leaner, you have to make that a priority, and then you can start manipulating your program design around that. So for example, if you're looking to get stronger on your main lifts, then of course you're going to make the compound lifts like deadlifts, squats, OHP, bench press. You're going to make them the priority for your program, and you're going to build the program around that with accessory work, which is going to help strengthen those lifts. You know, you're going to bring in an element of periodization to help you get stronger over time, things like that. When it comes to building muscle, again, you're going to kind of prioritize your program to make sure that you are lifting heavy, to make sure that you are bringing in overload progressively throughout your program. You know, you're introducing more volume slowly over time, you know, increasing intensity wherever you can. You've got to look at these things. You have to make your goal a priority first of all before you look into the program design. And depending on what you do is going to obviously change the shape of your program. You know, if you are into the bodybuilding aspect, for example, and you want to bring up like another body part, if you want to make it, you know, a little bit bigger or something, or if you want to focus more time on certain body parts to make them bigger, then of course that's going to change the way that your program is designed, because you need to accommodate for the fact that you've got to include more volume for certain muscle groups to help them grow. So it means that you're going to have to change your training depending on like recovery aspects, depending on you know, when that muscle is being used in other sessions with other muscle groups, things like that. So you have to take your overall goal first of all, and then see how you're going to break down your training after that. So always look at your goal first of all before you start manipulating your training program, because depending on what your goal is, you're going to need to pretty much design the whole program based around what that is. So get very, very clear on what your goals are. Because all right, guys, we are going to go through the fourth point now, which is going to be training days per week. So this is going to be now kind of the base layer of your program, or the kind of program that you're going to be looking at to follow, okay? Now, there's going to be 2 points for this, which is going to influence the amount of training days per week that you're going to need. The first point then is going to be about your previous training age and experience and the previous training block that you've currently been following. Again, I'm going to need a hell of a lot longer time to kind of go into detail on this one, but you know, I don't want to completely mindfuck everyone who watches this video. But the best way to kind of go about this, then you've got to look at your previous training age and experience, you know, look at the amount of volume that you've currently already adapted to, because that's going to have an influence on the amount of volume that you're going to need in this training block to help further progress with your goals. So you've got to look at your previous training program, your previous training block, and the current amount of experience that you've got and the amount of volume that you've currently adapted to, because they're going to play a massive part in the next part of the program. The second point is going to be lifestyle factors. You know, we all have, you know, things like family, social life, work, hobbies, and other interests, which take up a lot of time in our week. And obviously that's going to play a massive part when it comes to, you know, figuring out where and when you're going to be able to train in a weekly basis. And, you know, we're not bodybuilders, we're not professional bodybuilders who make this their complete life. So it's easy for them to train. We have things which come up every single week, which is going to throw our lifestyles and such, which is going to kind of throw our training patterns a little bit. So the best thing to do is kind of look at your overall Monday to Sunday calendar, you know, and just have a look and see, figure out the times in your week where you can dedicate, you know, an hour to an hour and a half to train consistently. If you can find regular slots in that week where you know that you can consistently train without any worries or without any distractions or difficulties, then you can block that time off to train, and you can realistically turn around and say, right, well, I've got 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week where I could potentially train. But it really needs to be a time and a place every single week where you know that you can dedicate that time to training, because there is no point in, kind of turning around and saying that you can train 5, 6 times a week, where realistically you probably can only manage 3 or 4. You've got to be realistic with these things. So, look at your overall time, figure out where in the week that you can actually train consistently every single week without distraction, and block that time off for the gym. And that's going to be a realistic time for you to be able to get into the gym. And that's going to play a massive part when it comes to training splits and training methods, which we're going to talk about in the next few slides. Okay. All right. Now we're going to go for point number 5, which is going to be training splits, guys. So training splits is very much going to depend on the amount of days that you have per week to train, and it's also going to depend on your current training age and experience as well. Can you now see why I keep saying that this whole thing is like a black hole? It is literally endless. There are millions and millions of things that you have to consider, but I'm going to try and do my best here to kind of summarize it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk about the training splits that you can potentially do depending on the amount of days that you have available to you. Okay, so if you have like 3 days a week where you want to train, again, it's very much goal dependent, but you'll find that these things can be adapted to it. If you have 3 days a week available, my recommendations often are full body superset splits. Training full body 3 times a week, they are perfect for beginners because it helps to bring an overall balance of training to all aspects of the body. But it's something that you can obviously adapt all the way up to advanced trainers as well, who still only have 3 days a week. You can obviously make manipulations to volume, intensity, and things like that. So full body splits are perfect for 3 days, because it allows you to get enough volume in depending on your training age, experience, and your goal. And you're still going to be able to train every single body part evenly as well. And it's going to be time efficient as well because you're going to be using supersets. But again, we're going to come on to that a little bit later. If you have like 4 days a week available, you could have a look at doing things like upper lower splits. Again, this one I find very common. This is something that I've been doing with the majority of my clients, because again, it's so easily adaptable depending on their goals. You can have a very, very minimal amount of volume for someone who's brand new, and you can adapt it all the way up to someone who's quite advanced and needs more volume, intensity, and different types of exercises and things like that. So upper lower splits, again, it allows a full body approach. It allows each body part to be trained evenly depending on the goals, and there's not going to be any types of imbalances. If you're looking at 5 days per week, something that I've been running personally myself is I've been doing a push-pull legs upper lower split. Now, you can actually use push-pull legs as a 3-day routine as well. However, I would still prefer to use the full body approach, just because you'll easily be able to get a lot more volume in overall in that program. But again, we can talk about that another time. So on a 5-day split, I typically do push-pull legs upper lower. Again, it allows me to train everything twice a week. It allows me to get as much volume as I personally need in. You've got to understand that obviously I'm at an intermediate or an advanced stage compared to most people. So I need a lot more in terms of volume and intensity to be able to force progression and adaptation in my body. So I need a 5-day split, and it means that by doing push-pull legs, I can effectively get in all the volume that I need across those 5 sessions. And if you're looking at 6-day splits, if you are the type of person who wants to train 6 times a week, or if you're in an advanced or intermediate stage, you could potentially looking at doing a push-pull legs kind of split. So again, that kind of works for most people. Again, it allows you to get in as much volume as you want, or as you typically need for your training. But what I would say is that most beginners and probably up to intermediate stages don't really need to be training 6 times a week, because it's not likely that you're going to need that much volume to force an adaptation in your body, of course, depending on your goal. There really is no point in doing like twice a week splits and stuff if you're really doing a very, very low amount of volume. There's just no point in doing it. So you might as well, train in a shorter amount of time, window of time, and get more volume into each session, because obviously you're going to get more results out of it. You're going to feel better for it. And yeah, that's basically my views and opinions on that. So we are now going to move on to point number 6, which is going to be training methods. Now, for the majority, you'll probably want to stick with standard sets, as in standalone exercises, just focusing on that specific exercise in that period of time. So This is really useful, of course, for anyone who's looking to, build strength or build progression in terms of the weight that they're lifting. Going with standard sets is perfectly acceptable, and that's like the majority of my program myself. If I really want to improve my lifts, improve the amount of intensity and overall like total volume of my programs, then I really want to be doing standalone sets so I can put as much effort into those exercises as possible. What you got to understand is when you start throwing in like supersets and giant sets, again, I'm going to cover this in a little bit. When you start throwing in things like that, obviously you've got to consider fatigue levels, because obviously that can obviously wear away at you as you go through your session. You're going to feel more depleted, and you're not going to be able to put in as much time and energy into each lift. So you've got to bear that in mind. So I would always go with standard sets wherever you can. But obviously time is a very precious thing. Not everyone has got an hour to an hour and a half to spend in the gym. So they need something that is going to be more time efficient for them. And that is where supersets come into play. Supersets are a fantastic training tool just because they're simply time efficient, and it allows you to get the same amount of volume in for your training session into a short amount of time. But you've got to be very careful when it comes to using supersets, okay? When I use supersets, I'm using it purely for an agonist and antagonist movement pair. So what I mean by that is we do a superset of 2 exercises together, which are going to be opposing muscle groups, a push and a pull, for example, okay? Because what that's doing is you're training 2 muscle groups in the same period of time, but because they are 2 separate muscle groups, completely away from each other, and they're 2 different types of movements, you're not going to be fatiguing the other muscle with the first or the second movement. So when you look, for example, when people do like a chest superset, they'll do like a dumbbell press, for example, superset with a fly. By the time that they get to the fly, their chest is already fatigued from the amount of intensity that they've been lifting in that first exercise. So chances are in the second exercise, they're not going to be lifting with the correct form, with the correct technique, and they're probably not going to be recruiting as many muscle fibers as they potentially could, which kind of makes that second exercise a little bit redundant, if anything. They're not really doing anything to force an adaptation or further progress. So when it comes to supersets, you want to be doing opposing muscle groups, because while one muscle group is going to be resting, the other is going to be working, and it's going to work vice versa. And chances are in a push and pull, you're not going to be using any like secondary exercises involved in those movements, which are going to create further fatigue. So yeah, supersets in general are a fantastic tool to be using in your training. They're great when it comes to being time efficient for workouts. But if you're going to use supersets, personally, I would only use them for push and pull exercises to avoid the fatigue problems which I mentioned earlier on. You can also look at doing things like giant sets as well. So giant sets and trisets, for example, trisets are 3 exercises back to back. Giant sets are 4 exercises back to back. And yeah, so when it comes to those kind of exercises, again, you can adopt them because they are very time efficient and allows you to get the right amount of volume in. But again, you want to have an approach where when you're designing these trisets or giant sets, you want to be training muscle groups which aren't cropping up frequently in that giant set. So you want to be doing opposing muscle groups and giving each muscle group enough time and recovery in between before you hit them again. So that's what you've got to bear in mind. But when it comes to trisets and giant sets, you won't often find them in a lot of programs, and I don't typically include them in a lot of training programs for my clients unless they really need to, and that again depends on frequency of training sessions and other things like that. But yeah, that covers point number 6, guys. Alright then guys, so I kind of had to cut off the end of that video there because I ran out of memory on my phone, but luckily it finished just in time to finish that last point. But anyway, to kind of summarize this whole video then, as I already mentioned earlier on, programming is literally a mindfuck, and as you can probably tell by all of that I've just gone through, yeah, it's like going into a never-ending black hole. That is basically what programming is. But the whole reason I made this video was to kind of give you guys a little bit of a push in the right direction in terms of the way you've got to start thinking about programming as such, and the kind of direction you can go in terms of program choices and stuff. Like I said, I'll never ever tell you what kind of program is going to be right for you. There is no one size fits all approach with this, but you can make some general kind of like recommendations with programs depending on obviously days per week, training goal, age and experience, all things like that. So that was the whole reason for this video, is just to give you a little bit of a push in the right direction to send you on the right path of the things that you've got to do. But ultimately, it's going to come down to self-awareness. You need to be aware of your situation, your body, your lifestyle, all these millions of factors that I've just gone through in this video. You need to be aware of these things if you really want to be able to program accurately and accordingly towards your goals and your current experience and age, things like that. But one thing I'll always say is, you know, if you can, invest in a coach. The best thing you can do is invest in a coach to handle the programming things for you, because I can guarantee you going through all of this kind of stuff yourself is gonna literally send you into complete psychopath mode. So if I was you, I would invest in a coach. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a coach myself. There are very, very good coaches out there who are very good at programming as well. Invest in a coach and they will handle a lot of this stuff for you, because they're able to read you better than what you're able to read yourself. But anyway, guys, that's enough for now. I'm going to finish the video here. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe, the usual stuff. I will catch you guys soon.